In the town of Fossil, Oregon, population 470, is the Fossil Museum.
It's not just a huge museum that you walk through. It's a museum that you walk through with the families that you knew as their way of life. So we're actually a warehouse of memories, and it's when you hear them walk through there, they'll say, oh, I remember Elizabeth Hoover, she was my school teacher or my grandfather. So we preserve, it's just a walking story for some people when they come through, a walking history.
One of the faces in the yellowed photos on the wall of the Fossil Museum is Bill Reinhart, who is now 93.
My great-grandparents started the town of Fossil, and they came here many, many years ago, and they had a small ranch about 3 miles from here, and they wanted a post office, but they said, well, they had to have a town for a post office, so they moved into town here and started the town of Fossil. It was just an ordinary town, and we had grade schools and high schools, and that was about it. You know, most of the kids who were old enough worked on the ranches in summertime, but some of them even worked in the wintertime, so because they needed lots of help.
All the children had to help, and it was dependent on their age. I would say the little ones, usually their first job was to go out and feed chickens, and everybody got to hoe the garden. You worked and played hard. Most of the girls, they went through the 8th grade. Usually the boys had to stop and help, like with the lambing, or if there was branding or crops to get in. So the young men usually didn't make it through the 8th grade there. And there was not paper, and there was not pencils, so it was done orally, and it was done by repetition. When you said your ABCs, everybody said their ABCs out loud. When you did your math tables, it was out loud. It was by repeating. And when you studied handwriting, they had their own little chalkboards, and you did cursive and you practiced. So that even the people that didn't graduate from the 8th grade were very well versed.
In those days, everything was on a ranch, really. The town wasn't very much without all the ranches around.
It was hard and long days. You have to figure at the turn of the century, everything was done by hand, by horse. They got up before daylight to do their milking, do their chores. They always had big breakfasts, they ate hearty, and they were probably out in the fields by daylight. And then they would stop for a noon break. They would come in for supper, probably 6 or 7 o'clock at night. They still had to do their milking and whatever chores they had left to do to take care of their livestock. They would look at fruit and say, okay, we have to have 52 jars of peaches because that's a jar a week. So that's how they put up their food. They raised their own meat. They raised hogs, chickens, cows. It was the hard way to make a living.
Despite the hard work, the early homesteaders enjoyed recreation such as camping, socials, dancing, and riverboating. The John Day Queen met its untimely end when it smashed against rocks in the rapids of the John Day River. Charles Clarno, the ship's builder and captain, persuaded 20 or more people to help maneuver the Queen by ropes down the river. Noted one observer, they might have made it if they weren't all drunk. By the 1940s, the era of the homesteaders drew to an end.
They had 2 wars then. A lot of the men were gone away from the war. And usually when the men were gone, it was hard for a woman and small children to keep up with farm.
There were a lot of places that went kaput because there was nobody to take care of them, you know.
A lot of people found living in larger cities, they could get jobs and it wasn't as hard as working on a farm.
There were people here that never came back. They just found out there was other things to do other than live in Fossil. And so Now there's about 3 big ranches here, and that's all. And years ago there were dozens of them, because you got homesteaders, and some of them made it and some of them didn't.
Although the original homesteaders are gone, they leave behind traces of the past and stories of hard work, family, and community.